Okay, hope you can see it and you can hear me good enough. All right, so as Pedro mentioned, it's actually pretty interesting and challenging at the same time to teach some soft skills to probably kids that have some of the most interesting hard skills nowadays. So they are very skilled in computer science, they're very skilled in the use of computers, and you know, the fact that they have this handicap in terms of social engagement and in terms of social skills is actually an important opportunity for improvement. And if you want to teach them these kind of skills, you have to go out of your comfort zone and into their territory. Otherwise, it's not going to work. The first thing that I always tell them is I explain why do they have this specific course in their computer science degree, because most courses don't have this specific course. And this happens because there is this broad notion in society that people from computer science are not that keen on interaction with other humans. And they find it very amusing. And it's kind of a gateway to unblock what is going to happen during the semester in the class. But besides my best efforts to make classes interesting, the thing is they are very used to managing their own time, and they appreciate a lot learning at their own rhythm and in their own schedule. And that's why we thought it would be interesting to develop a podcast that could be an accessory in helping students develop their skills during the semester. The great thing about working with a podcast is if you record it today, it's going to be an interesting learning tool for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a very good investment of your time. But what I felt from my experience, and I will talk to you a little bit about that in a couple of minutes, is that, the format of the podcast is not for everyone. So I work relatively well with video and with face-to-face interaction, but working with a podcast, talking to just the computer and a microphone without any video assistance has been harder than I thought. But well, let's go. So see if the slide changes. Okay, so as I told you, the rationale for this is that, we would like to broaden these soft skills to other contexts. All courses have hard skills, specific hard skills, but if you come to think about it, there's a set of soft skills that every student should have at the moment. So the idea of developing this podcast is that we could broaden the scope of the soft skills that we're trying to teach. And instead of just approaching the students from computer science, we could actually make it available for a broader audience, okay? At the same time, we are thinking about implementing this course, of course, in other degrees, but we have a lot of courses where they have some psychology and sociology and some behavioral sciences. So I'm not sure if in those courses, a course with the characteristics and those degrees, if a course with those characteristics are going to be good enough for our students. But anyway, we work not only in terms of soft skills, but also in providing them with some important employability tools. And this means, of course, helping them to develop their first CV, their presentation letter, how should they dress, how should they conduct themselves in an interview. And of course, we would like to bring some support from specialists that work in companies and that do recruitment and selection of candidates to make them understand a little bit more what they are going to be feeling when they start trying to get a job. And that is why the podcast would be important. Okay. And podcasts have been shown to be interesting because they are very flexible solutions and they promote this autonomous learning that is becoming increasingly popular within our students. So what we wanted to do with this project was to increase the students' engagement, promote a little bit more discussion between themselves, and of course, as I told you, increase not only flexibility in teaching, but also promote some autonomy in our students. And of course, if this goes to the higher levels of the project, we would like to have develop some critical thinking, which is obviously pretty hard. So what we do now is that synchronous teaching, either by the use of online classes or in class teaching, we know that most people are still using the expository methodology. And we as teachers have this problem. It's easier to use the expository methodology than any other methodology because there's no feedback. There's no challenge from our students. So every time you promote interaction, every time you bring your students into the classroom and make them interact with you, you're putting yourself in a danger zone, right? So it's more comfortable for most teachers to use the expository methodology. That's the thing. But what we do now is that the learning outcomes are becoming increasingly worse over time. So our students don't want this passive experience. They want interaction, and they want to be able to steer the direction of learning process, okay? So we need to adapt our strategies, and podcasts seem to be interesting. So the idea was to develop some asynchronous teaching methodologies based on formats that they would like to use, or that are more similar to things that they use in their daily lives. And what we've seen is that there are some podcasts, namely in Spotify, that reach an incredibly huge audience. They are very successful. And this happens once again because although some of these podcasts discuss very interesting and very scientifically supported themes, what ends up happening is that they do it in a context that is mostly associated to fun. And as Professor Rosa mentioned before, when you add this fun factor, things become easier in terms of learning outcomes. So the idea would be to have 10 sessions between 30 to 45 minutes. And what we would like to talk is something around these topics that we feel that might be interesting for our students. So not only a characterization of what's going on in terms of soft skills, but also how should you transition from university to the work environment? How or which soft skills should you train? What kind of current trends show us about what futures and challenges they will face, some employability tools, some personal branding, which is something that is very important nowadays, and how to tame the online beast, because we do know that some of the work is going to be done remotely, and there will be many digital interactions in the workplace. So we need to show them how to be able to make a difference in the digital world. How does it work? So there are a couple of phases that you need to go through in order to deploy a podcast. Sorry about that. The first phase, obviously, is the recording phase. And for me, this is the hardest part. So every time I started to record an episode, at the end of the episode, I wasn't happy with the results, either because there wasn't enough dynamics between me or the person that I was interviewing or having a discussion with, or because we ended up discussing things that weren't as interesting to our students as I thought they would be. So we never went from this phase to the other ones. I kept scrapping the episodes. So the idea is we will do this project later down the road, but we still haven't found the right context or the right people to do it. And that's the thing. But after the recording phase, we'll have the visualization phase, which is important for our students to get a good grasp of the things that are being discussed there. And then, of course, we have to provide them with supporting information to make the podcast really useful in terms of learning outcomes. So the podcast in itself might be interesting, but you need to provide some context, and you need to make sure that you have another tools that they can be provided to them in order to make the learning outcomes a little bit better. And supporting literature is important, and of course, some guiding questions for them to follow the podcast. Then our students would have to prepare a one-page abstract based on what they have found. And it's important that this part of the abstract is going to be the support for the discussion they will have at the end of this process. So we will promote a guided discussion in class between students, and the individual experience that each one of them brings is going to be really relevant to make things more interesting, more interactive, and once again, in order to promote more engagement and better learning outcomes. Okay, and that's it. I think we expect, as you know, better outcomes, more motivation, and I think that we are also changing the way that teachers look at, the way they should be teaching. Once again, I think that teachers are more and more these, facilitators of education, and not necessarily the guys providing all the information that our students need. We just have to show them the way to acquire the knowledge, and not necessarily being the primary source or the only source of information and knowledge. And that's all for today. And sorry once again for my voice, but I've tried it everything and it's not going well. Thank you.